Hey folks, SamTheThomasFan1 is back with the 4th episode of my Thomas and Friends Season 17 reviews. Wayward Winston. Okay, before I review this episode, I'll probably explain to you why I'm laughing. This episode is actually enjoyable. No kidding. The link to the episode is in the description box. Watch it and you'll see what I mean. The episode starts out with a brief description on how engines look after their lines. Sometimes the lines are bumpy. We see as Henry, Percy and Thomas tried a bumpy line and get bounced all over the place. Engines on the track, wibble wobble, engines on the track. Anyway, Thomas was taking the Fat Controller and his family to some sort of castle. I couldn't remember the name. When Thomas went over the bouncy track. When the Fat Controller sees the bouncy track, he says he must repair it immediately. He then tells Thomas to carry on, but slowly. Soon, workmen were repairing the bumpy track. Each day, the Fat Controller came in Winston, his inspection car, to see how the work was progressing. The thing is that the Fat Controller isn't very good at driving Winston and hasn't gotten used to it yet. Which I find weird since he's been driving his car for years. Winston tells the Fat Controller it's early days. That I don't understand. As Winston drives along, Henry and Gordon make fun of him. In front of the Fat Controller and they didn't get into trouble? What was all that about? The next day, the Fat Controller and Winston arrive back at the broken track to inspect it. Winston tells the Fat Controller not to forget to put its brakes on, and the Fat Controller does so. While the Fat Controller inspects the tracks, Percy pops up to Winston and asks what's going on, because he looks sad. Winston tells Percy that the Fat Controller is not a very good driver. Percy tries to comfort Winston by telling him that the Fat Controller is still learning, but Winston says he wishes he could learn faster, and he also wishes sometimes he could go without a driver. Percy laughs and tells Winston not to be silly and that he needs a driver. Wow! Percy just made a reference to what he said in Thomas Comes to Breakfast, one of my favourite episodes from the classic season. It's like this season is bringing the classics back. Anyway, the Fat Controller climbs back into Winston and says goodbye to Percy, and they set off again. The Fat Controller goes further down the line and stops to inspect more track. Winston was about to remind the Fat Controller to put his brakes on, but he stops himself and starts rolling away on his own. OMG, another runaway is starting! The Fat Controller sees Winston running away and he calls him to come back. Then he finds Thomas, stops him, and tells him to follow Winston. Winston goes by Emily and Gordon. Emily tells Gordon that it's Winston and he has no driver. And Gordon's all like, "No, you think?" Then Thomas and the Fat Controller go by calling Winston. Gordon says that Winston will get into big trouble. Winston was having the time of his life. He was rolling down the line all on his own, but Thomas and the Fat Controller were catching up to him. Oh my god, they put Signalman back in the series. This episode has everything. The Signalman sees Winston and tries to switch him off the main line, but switches Thomas and the Fat Controller instead. The Fat Controller tells Thomas not to go this way. Sir? It wasn't Thomas who switched the points! Were you ignoring the narrator? The signalman makes an emergency call while the Fat Controller sees Winston going underneath the bridge and tells Thomas to go faster. Also, great camera angle. The second signalman received the message and switches Thomas back onto the main line. They catch up with Winston again and the Fat Controller says well done to Thomas. Once again, sir, Thomas wasn't the one who switched the points. Meanwhile, Bertie was pulling up to a nearby crossing. Yay, Bertie's back! He didn't know Winston was coming. Winston tells Bertie to stop as he goes across the crossing between the gates. Winston apologizes to Bertie. Then Thomas tells Bertie to watch out as he comes through, and the Fat Controller tells Bertie not to move, and Bertie obeys, but wonders for how long. Probably until the end of this episode. Winston came spinning up to a junction when he saw Paxton up ahead. Nice to see they're still using Paxton. Winston's signal goes red, but he couldn't stop. He tells Paxton to watch out, and Paxton puts on his brakes. He stops just in time. Paxton wonders what the hurry is. Winston decides he doesn't like going on his own anymore. He was hurrying towards Tim's sheds, but there were some trucks ahead, and Winston couldn't stop. Winston thinks he's going to crash, then he goes slower and stops. Winston asks what's happened, and then the Fat Controller but then Thomas and the Fat Controller catch him. And the Fat Controller says he's running out of gas. He tells Winston it was very irresponsible to go off without him. But then Winston tells the Fat Controller it wasn't all his fault because the Fat Controller had forgotten to put his brakes on. Oh no, the Fat Controller is so busted. The Fat Controller agrees that he should have put his brakes on, but Winston says he should have reminded him and that he realized he does need a driver. The Fat Controller tells Winston not to worry, early days. I sort of understand that. All the engines were happy as the tracks were fixed. The engines like the tracks but still make fun of Winston. But Winston was happy to have the Fat Controller back as his driver. So like I said at the start of this thing, this episode is actually enjoyable. Even the bad bits didn't seem that threatening. I mean, with the runaway, the past of other characters, including the return of Bertie, and Percy's reference to Thomas Comes to Breakfast, it all makes this the best episode of the season so far. So I think you all know what I'm gonna give this. 5 out of 5 stars. That was episode 4 of my Thomas and Friends season 17 reviews. Tomorrow I'll be reviewing the 5th and last season 17 episode until the fall of 2017. And that episode is Steamy Stafford. I hope you enjoyed my review on Wayward Winston, so bye.